My fiancé, Julian, planned to lock me in a high-security psychiatric ward the moment the ink dried on our certificate. I listened to his breathless groans as he took my stepsister, Chloe, on the leather sofa outside my bridal fitting room, completely unaware that the delusional heiresses they mocked had stopped taking their mind-altering poison 6 months ago. They thought they were leading a fragile lamb to slaughter. By the time this wedding was over, I would be the one locking the asylum doors behind them. The custom silk gown felt like a shroud. I stood perfectly still, my reflection in the atelier mirrors showing a ghost draped in ivory lace. A fragile, broken thing. That, at least, was exactly what they needed to believe. Beyond the velvet curtain, the sounds of my impending marriage echoed. Not champagne flutes, but the wet sound of skin against leather, and Chloe's muffled giggles. "Julian, stop. Someone will hear us," Chloe whispered, her voice a syrupy concoction of fake modesty and raw ambition. The rustle of expensive fabric scraped against the Italian leather sofa. "Let them," came the arrogant, velvet-wrapped drawl of Julian Vance, my fiancé. "My darling fragile Scarlet is locked in her little glass box, probably crying over a loose thread. She's completely out of it today. I made sure Eleanor upped her dosage this morning." My pale eyes, void of emotion, remained fixed on my reflection. I didn't flinch. The girl they described would have collapsed, but I hadn't swallowed Eleanor's pills for 6 months. My mind, once fogged, was now sharper than a scalpel. "Ugh, don't remind me of the crazy pill popper," Chloe scoffed, a zipper being violently pulled down, breaking the quiet jazz. "How are you going to touch her on the wedding night, Julian? She looks like a walking corpse. It's repulsive." "I won't have to touch her for long," Julian grunted, the rhythm of the sofa springs groaning. "Once the ink is dry on the marriage certificate and the sterling board seats are transferred to the Vance portfolio, she'll have a tragic, irreversible mental breakdown." "The sanitarium in Switzerland is already booked, Chloe. A permanent, padded suite with a lovely view of the Alps. And then, it's just you, me, and a combined empire." A chilling smile broke through my icy mask. A padded suite with a lovely view, I thought, devoid of rage, replaced by cold calculation. "I must remember to thank you when I lock you inside it." On the antique table, the seamstress had left a velvet pincushion. I pulled a long, silver sewing needle. They wanted a sick, bleeding victim. I would give them one. Without hesitation, I pressed the needle into my left index finger. A crimson bead of blood swelled. I let it grow, then pressed my bloody finger against the inner lining of the silk bodice, leaving a dark stain over my heart. A secret brand, a silent promise. Sucking the remaining blood from my finger, I closed my eyes and summoned the ghost. I let my shoulders slump, practiced a dull, vacant stare, and allowed a slight, pathetic tremble to take over my hands. "Julian?" I called out, my voice a raspy, weak whisper, perfectly calibrated to sound like a whimpering child. "Julian, my head." It's spinning. The rhythmic squeaking of the leather sofa halted abruptly. A frantic rustling of clothes, a hissed curse from Chloe, and the heavy thud of Julian's Italian loafers hitting the floorboards. I counted to 5, letting the panic settle over them, before slowly pushing the heavy velvet curtain aside. The VIP lounge was a picture of frantic composure. Julian adjusted his tie, a smear of Chloe's lipstick near his jawline. Chloe smoothed her tweed skirt, raking fingers through disheveled hair. The air was thick with expensive perfume, sweat, and betrayal. "Scarlet, darling." Julian crossed the room in 3 strides, his face morphing into a mask of patronizing concern. He gripped my bare, fragile shoulders a little too tightly. "Are you all right? You look exceptionally pale. The seamstresses said you were just resting." I think the lights are too bright," I murmured, averting my eyes. My knees buckled slightly, forcing Julian to catch my waist. He recoiled, a micro-expression of disgust flashing across his eyes. I logged it. Chloe finally turned, her lips swollen, holding a trembling glass of champagne. She plastered on a sickly sweet, sympathetic smile. "Oh, sweetie, you look absolutely dreadful. Like a ghost. Are you sure you took your medication this morning?" You know how your paranoia flares up when you miss a dose. I took it, I whispered, forcing a single, pathetic tear to well up in my right eye. But when I was in there, I thought I heard. Julian's grip on my waist tightened painfully. Heard what, my love? His voice was dangerously soft, a velvet-wrapped threat. I thought I heard laughing. And crying, I stammered, looking frantically around the empty room, playing the delusional lunatic to perfection. Chloe let out an exaggerated sigh, exchanging a look of profound, burdened pity with Julian. Oh, Scarlett, not again. There's no one here but us. Your mind is playing tricks on you. The doctor warned us the stress of the wedding would trigger your auditory hallucinations. She's right, darling, Julian cooed, stroking my hair. It felt like spiders crawling across my scalp. You're just imagining things. You need to go home and rest. The real world is just a bit too much for my fragile little bird right now, isn't it? Fragile little bird. I will feed you your own tongue, Julian. Yes, I whimpered, nodding submissively. I just want to go home. I stumbled, catching myself on the Italian leather sofa. With a swift, unnoticeable flick, I wiped the remaining blood from my finger onto the cream-colored throw pillow where Chloe's head had been, a tiny, rusty speck of reality. The ride back to the penthouse was a suffocating descent. Julian kept his hand on my thigh, dissecting my sanity, reinforcing my dependence. I stared blankly out the window, nodding, silently absorbing every lie, hoarding them like ammunition. By nightfall, the penthouse was dead quiet. Eleanor had forced me to drink the nightly vitamin milk, which I promptly purged. Now, in the pitch black of my locked study, my face was illuminated only by the sterile, blue glow of 3 computer monitors. I wasn't looking at wedding arrangements. I was watching the live feed of microscopic security cameras I had secretly installed. 2 hours ago, Eleanor had crushed heavy-duty psychotropic pills into warm milk. Chloe then walked in, laughed with her mother, and casually dropped liquid LSD into the same glass. They want me to lose my mind, I thought. They want a crazy woman. Time to give them one. I reached for the keyboard, but before my fingers touched the keys, the ambient temperature plummeted. The silence was broken by the faintest click of the balcony door unlocking from the outside. My penthouse was on the 42nd floor. The balcony was inaccessible. I froze. The scent hit me first, a sharp, intoxicating mixture of ozone, rain, dark tobacco, and a specific, discontinued cedarwood cologne. It was a scent that belonged to a ghost. A scent that had burned to ashes on a yacht off the coast of Monaco 3 years ago. The hair on my neck stood on end as a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Before I could scream, a large hand, clad in cold, black leather, clamped violently over my mouth. A strong arm wrapped around my waist, pinning me to the heavy leather chair. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clawed at the glove, wide eyes staring frantically at my reflection in the monitor. Behind me, barely illuminated, was the towering silhouette of a man. He leaned down, his face hidden in shadows, lips brushing my ear. The breath was hot, and the voice a low, gravelly rasp that sent a violent, electrifying shockwave down my spine. Did you miss me, little bird? I stopped struggling instantly. It was impossible. The grip on my mouth didn't loosen, but the thumb of the leather glove gently, almost reverently, stroked my cheekbone. They've played with you long enough, Sebastian Bash, Thorne whispered. The game has begun, my lady. Let's show them what real madness looks like. The leather glove tasted like ash, rain, and old money. For 3 years, I had mourned a grave that held nothing but charred remains, letting the Vances believe they had broken me. Now, the architect of my survival stood behind me, solid and breathing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Slowly, deliberately, I raised my own trembling hand and wrapped my fingers around his thick wrist. I pulled his hand away from my mouth, the friction of his leather glove scraping against my skin. You're ruining my perfect victim act, Bash, I whispered into the suffocating darkness, my voice remarkably steady. A low, vibrating chuckle rumbled through his chest. You always did have a flair for the dramatic, my little bird. but I watched the feed from your boutique excursion today. Letting them screw on your bridal sofa? You're playing with your food, Scarlett. It's time to take a bite. He stepped around the chair, the monitor's blue light illuminating the sharp lines of his face. Sebastian Thorne was no longer the reckless boy. He was a weapon forged in hellfire. A bespoke midnight black suit clung to his broad shoulders, and the danger in his eyes made my pulse hammer. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a tiny, unmarked glass vial on my desk. The liquid inside was completely clear. My engagement gift, Bash murmured, leaning over me. Military-grade synthetic hallucinogen. Odorless, colorless, and highly absorbent through the skin. It fractures reality. A single drop induces severe paranoid psychosis within 48 hours. What are you going to do with it? I picked up the vial, the cold glass sending a thrill of pure, sadistic anticipation down my spine. I looked up at the monitors, watching the looped footage of my stepsister pouring LSD into my milk. I'm going to make her the belle of the ball, I smiled, the expression so utterly devoid of warmth it belonged on a corpse. The next morning, the penthouse buzzed with manufactured joy. I sat at the kitchen island, Eleanor, a walking advertisement for Botox, gliding in. Her smile was stretched thin. "Morning, darling," Eleanor cooed, her voice dripping with synthetic affection. She slid a tall crystal glass of freshly pressed green juice across the counter. I could see the heavy, chalky residue of the antipsychotics she had just crushed into it. "Drink up, sweetie. You need your vitamins. We wouldn't want another episode in front of the board members tonight, would we?" I looked up at her, letting my eyes widen with docile vulnerability. "You're always looking out for my mind, Eleanor. I don't know what I'd do without you. We're family, Scarlett." She patted my hand. "We protect our own." "Yes," I whispered, pulling the glass toward me. "We do." The moment she turned her back to answer a call, I seamlessly poured the entire contents of the glass into the potted orchid. I wiped the rim, leaving just enough green residue to make it look consumed. An hour later, I slipped into Chloe's dressing room. On her vanity table sat her holy grail, rosewater setting spray. My hand steady, I uncapped Bash's vial and emptied the hallucinogen into it, giving it a gentle swirl. "Stay hydrated, sister," I thought. By mid-afternoon, Julian arrived, bringing a bouquet of white lilies that looked more appropriate for a funeral. He found me sitting on the edge of my bed, compulsively twisting the heavy diamond ring on my finger. "Scarlett?" He approached cautiously, adopting his signature tone of exhausted patience. "Julian," I gasped, jumping up and gripping his lapels. I made sure my pupils were dilated, my breathing shallow and erratic. I need to tell you something, but you'll think I'm crazy." Hey, he murmured, wrapping his arms around me. I buried my face in his chest, playing the terrified victim. "What is it? Tell me." "It's Chloe," I whispered frantically against his shirt. "Julian, she looks at you, strangely. And yesterday, I heard her on the phone. She was saying that once the trust fund is unlocked, she wouldn't have to share anymore. Julian, what if? What if she wants to get rid of me?" I felt his body stiffen. By feeding him truth wrapped in paranoia, I triggered his ego. Chloe's sloppiness, her possessiveness, was a dangerous liability to a man craving absolute control. "Scarlett, you're spiraling," Julian said smoothly, but I could feel the tension radiating off his jaw. He was annoyed. Not at my paranoia, but at Chloe's perceived indiscretion. "Chloe is your sister. She supports us. You're just letting the anxiety of the gala get to you." "Maybe," I whimpered, pulling away and looking at him with tear-filled eyes. "But promise me you'll watch her tonight. Promise me, Julian. If she looks at you, if she tries to get close to you, just be careful, please." "I will," he promised, his eyes darkening with a genuine, creeping suspicion directed entirely at my stepsister. The seed was planted. The roots were already strangling his brain. The Plaza Ballroom was a suffocating sea of diamonds, silk, and hypocrisy. I stood beside Julian, accepting congratulations with a vacant smile. Across the room, Chloe looked radiant in an emerald gown, her skin glowing flawlessly from the tainted rosewater. Every sultry smile she sent, Julian was now met with icy irritation. Her flirtation was a reckless threat to his acquisition. At exactly 10 p.m., the poison breached the fortress of Chloe's mind. I was standing near the ice sculpture, sipping sparkling water, when I saw her hand tremble violently. She dropped her champagne flute, the crystal shattering sharply against the marble floor. Guests turned in surprise. Chloe didn't apologize. She stared at her own hands, eyes wide with sudden, primitive terror. She began to scratch frantically at her bare arms, manicured nails digging deep enough to draw thin lines of blood. "Get them off!" she gasped, her voice shrill and entirely unhinged. "Get them off me!" Julian stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Chloe, for God's sake, you've had too much to drink. Stop making a scene." He reached out to grab her arm. It was the worst mistake he could have made. Whatever fresh hell the hallucinogen had conjured, Julian was suddenly the monster at the center of it. She let out a blood-curdling, guttural scream that silenced the entire ballroom. "Don't touch me!" she shrieked, her face contorting into a mask of pure feral madness. She lunged backward, grabbing a heavy silver butter knife from a nearby cocktail table. "You're trying to eat me. I see them crawling out of your mouth. The bugs." Pandemonium erupted. Women screamed and scrambled backward. Eleanor shrieked her daughter's name, paralyzed by the sudden collapse of her perfect social facade. "Chloe, put the knife down!" Julian demanded, panic finally bleeding into his arrogant voice. He stepped toward her, raising his hands. With insane strength, Chloe lunged, slashing the butter knife upward. It caught Julian's jawline, drawing blood. He shouted, shoving her backward. Chloe crashed into the catering table, sending caviar and crystal crashing to the floor, where she thrashed, screaming about insects. Security guards swarmed the room. Sirens began to wail. The Vance Sterling engagement gala had just become the most violent, scandalous public meltdown in New York history. In the chaotic frenzy, no one noticed the frail, broken bride slipping out the heavy mahogany double doors. I walked down the quiet hallway, pushing open the glass doors to the private terrace. The cool night air cleared the stench of fear from my lungs. From the shadows, a tall figure stepped forward, handing me a crystal flute filled with perfectly chilled Dom Perignon. "Right on schedule," Bash murmured, leaning his forearms against the stone balustrade, looking down at the flashing red and blue police lights pulling up to the hotel entrance. "I have to admit, Mrs. Vance-to-be, you throw a hell of a party." I took a slow sip of the champagne. I looked down at the chaos unfolding below, my reflection catching in the glass doors behind me. I didn't look pale or broken anymore. I looked alive. "Don't call me that," I replied softly, my shoulder brushing his arm. "Julian is busy dealing with his rabid mistress, and Eleanor is about to spend the night in an emergency psychiatric ward with her perfect daughter." Bash turned his head, his dark eyes tracing the line of my throat. He reached out, his thumb gently wiping a stray drop of champagne from my lower lip. "Phase 1 is complete," he whispered, his voice dark and thrilling. "But Julian still thinks he's in control of your fortune. When do we burn his sanctuary to the ground?" I smiled, turning my gaze back to the flashing police lights. "Tomorrow, Bash. Tomorrow, I take them to the Hamptons, and we show Julian that the real monsters aren't hiding in Chloe's head. They're sleeping in his bed." The morning headlines screamed, "Madness at the Plaza." I sat at the dining table, buttering toast, as Eleanor paced, a caged animal barking orders at crisis PR managers. It was a bad reaction to seafood. That is the official statement. Do you hear me? Eleanor shrieked into the receiver. "If one tabloid mentions the word hallucinations or asylum, I will personally ensure your firm never works in this city again." She hung up, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with dry sobs. I took a slow, deliberate bite of my toast. It tasted like victory. "Eleanor," I murmured, my voice a perfect, fragile tremor. "Is Chloe? Is she going to be locked away? Like the doctors said I should be?" Eleanor's head snapped up, bloodshot eyes wide with horrifying realization. The padded cell she'd prepared for me was now occupied by her own daughter. "Don't be ridiculous, Scarlett," she snapped, though her voice lacked its usual venomous sting. She was terrified. "Chloe is just exhausted. The stress of helping with your wedding simply overwhelmed her." "But Julian said the doctors found traces of an unknown hallucinogen in her blood," I pressed, widening my eyes in innocent terror. I pulled my cashmere shawl tighter. Why would she take something like that? Do you think she was trying to take my medication? To see what it felt like? Eleanor froze, color draining from her face. The implication hit her. Their trap had snapped shut on the wrong prey. "I need to go to the hospital," Eleanor whispered hoarsely, grabbing her Birkin bag with trembling hands. She didn't look at me as she fled. By noon, Vance Enterprise was a fortress of panicked executives. The scandal caused merger stock to plummet. Julian hemorrhaged money, his reputation stained by his mistress's public breakdown. I arrived at the executive floor in a cream Dior dress, clutching a thermos. Julian's assistant, Peter, stumbled to intercept me. "Miss Sterling, Mr. Vance is in a board meeting." "I know, Peter," I said softly, giving him a wavering, tragic smile. "I just wanted to drop this off. He must be so stressed about my poor sister. I'll just wait in his private office until he's done." Before Peter could object, I slipped into Julian's inner sanctum. The room was a monument to his ego. Through the frosted glass wall, angry voices from the board meeting bled into the office. Julian stood at the head of the conference table, hands slammed flat. A hostile takeover. Julian's muffled voice barked. "Who the hell is backing this shell company? They bought up another 5% of our shares while we were doing damage control for Chloe's little episode." I smiled, walking toward Julian's desk. Bash was dismantling the Vance empire. Suddenly, the electronic lock on the office door clicked shut, the deadbolt sliding into place. I didn't flinch. The temperature dropped. The faint scent of dark tobacco and discontinued cedarwood cologne drifted through the sterile air. "You look far too pleased with yourself, future Mrs. Vance." A low, gravelly voice murmured from the shadows near the private coat closet. I turned. Sebastian Thorne stepped into the light, a lethal, exquisitely tailored predator in a charcoal suit, his dark hair messy, jaw stubbled. He moved with the predatory grace of a man who owned the shadows. "Bash," I breathed, my pulse instantly shifting to a frantic drumbeat. "You shouldn't be here. The entire building is on high alert." "I own the security company that monitors this building, Scarlett," he replied smoothly, closing the distance between us. He stopped inches from me, his towering frame completely obscuring the sunlight. "I own the cameras. I own the locks. And very soon, I'm going to own the man screaming in the next room." He reached out, his bare hands cool against my feverish skin, and traced the high collar of my Dior dress. "Take this off," he ordered softly. It wasn't a request. I kept my eyes locked on Bash's dark gaze, unzipped my dress. The silk pooled, leaving me in white La Perla lingerie, a bridal gift from Julian. Bash's eyes darkened, a dangerous, hungry fire igniting. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a length of pristine white silk ribbon from my wedding invitations. "Put your hands behind your back, little bird," he whispered, stepping entirely into my personal space. The heat radiating off his chest seared my bare skin. I obeyed instantly. This wasn't submission. It was a dark partnership. Bash bound my wrists with silk, the knot tight, utterly thrilling. He turned me, pressing my chest against Julian's desk. "He's right there, Scarlett," Bash murmured, leaning over me, his lips grazing my ear. His chest pressed heavily against my bound arms. Less than 10 feet away, bleeding out in his own boardroom, completely unaware that a dead man is taking what belongs to him. "I belong to no one," I gasped quietly, my eyes fluttering shut as Bash's large hand slid down my waist, gripping my hips with bruising, possessive force. "You belong to the fire," he corrected, his voice vibrating with agonizing history. "Just like I do." 3 years ago, Julian's mother had ignited a yacht to erase Bash, the illegitimate Thorne heir. He'd barely escaped, lungs scorched, back-branded. I was the only one who knew he survived, the only reason he crawled out of the ashes. Bash's mouth found the crook of my neck, his teeth scraping lightly against my pulse point. I bit down hard on my lower lip to swallow a moan as his hands explored the curves Julian had arrogantly claimed as his own. The outer office door opened. I could hear Peter's nervous stammering. "Mr. Vance, Miss Sterling is waiting inside for you." "Fabulous. Just what I need. More hysterics," Julian muttered darkly. Heavy footsteps approached the frosted glass door. Bash finally pulled back, his breathing ragged, his eyes practically black. With a swift, fluid motion, he untied the silk ribbon, slipped it back into his pocket, and grabbed my dress from the floor. He draped it over my shoulders, just as the handle of the frosted glass door turned. It was locked. Julian rattled the handle violently. "Scarlett, are you in there? Why is this damn door locked?" Bash stepped backward into the shadows of the coat closet, pressing a single, lingering kiss to the corner of my mouth. "Tonight," he mouthed silently. Before disappearing into the darkness of the service exit, I quickly shimmied into my dress, zipped it, grabbed the thermos, and with a deep breath, let the mask fall back into place before clicking the lock open. Julian practically fell into the room, his tie loosened, a vein pulsing dangerously in his forehead. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Why was the door locked?" I don't know," I stammered, my voice trembling perfectly. I looked around the empty office, my eyes wide with manufactured terror. It just clicked. Julian, it felt so cold in here. I felt like someone was watching me. Julian let out a long, exhausted sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose. The suspicion faded, replaced by the familiar, patronizing irritation he always reserved for my episodes. "Stop it, Scarlett. Not today. I cannot deal with your delusions today. The company is under attack. Chloe is in a straitjacket, and I am running out of patience." "I brought you tea," I whispered pathetically, holding up the thermos. He didn't even look at it. He walked past me, collapsing into his heavy leather desk chair. "Just leave it. Go home, Scarlett. Take a pill. Sleep. I'll see you at the penthouse tonight." I nodded submissively. Then a cold, venomous smile spread across my face as the door closed. "Sleep tight, Julian." It was past midnight when Julian returned. He pushed open my bedroom door, shedding his suit, defeated. He walked toward the ensuite, but stopped dead as he passed my bed. The silence in the room suddenly became deafening. I watched his silhouette stiffen, his breathing hitched, coming to a sharp, agonizing halt. Slowly, with a hand that trembled violently, Julian reached out and picked up the small, metallic object resting perfectly in the dead center of my pristine white pillow. It was a silver Zippo lighter, scratched, charred, tarnished. The engraving on the front was unmistakable, the Thorne family crest. The lighter Sebastian Thorne had carried, supposedly resting with his burned corpse in the Mediterranean. Julian dropped the lighter as if it had burned right through his flesh. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp, echoing clatter. "No," Julian whispered, the sound tearing out of his throat like a dying animal. He stumbled backward, his eyes darting frantically around the dark shadows of the bedroom, his chest heaving with sudden, unadulterated terror. "No, it's impossible. He's dead." "He's dead." I sat perfectly still in the armchair, my face an unreadable mask in the darkness. "Julian?" I asked, my voice soft, innocent, and laced with a lethal dose of poison. "Is something wrong? Are you seeing things?" Julian spun around, his eyes wide, manic, devoid of arrogance. The gaslighter was plunged into darkness. The ghost had returned. Madness had begun. Isolation is often prescribed as the cure for a fragile mind, but I knew the sprawling, empty halls of the Hamptons estate would be the perfect slaughterhouse for Julian's. He dragged me out to the desolate coastline to hide from the phantom of his dead brother, completely unaware that he had just locked himself in a cage with the very ghost he was running from. By the time the storm broke the power lines, the only thing left for him to fear wasn't the supernatural, but the terrified woman holding the camera. The silent drive to the Hamptons was suffocating. Julian, unshaven and twitching, gripped the wheel, eyes darting. He hadn't slept since finding the lighter. I sat quietly, playing the compliant fiancé, my pulse a steady, lethal drumbeat. watching him tangle himself in my web. The Hamptons estate sat on a private cliff overlooking the Atlantic. "Get inside!" Julian barked, storming up the steps, punching the entry code. I followed, letting the wind whip my hair. I didn't need a key. Bash had already rewritten the master code. The ghost was inside the machine. The moment the heavy front door slammed shut, Julian engaged the security lockdown. Thick steel shutters rolled down over the floor-to-ceiling windows, plunging the grand foyer into artificial twilight. He was sealing his own tomb. "Julian, you're scaring me," I murmured, wrapping my arms around myself and sinking into the plush sofa. "Why are we locking the storm shutters? The weather report only said heavy rain." He ignored me, pacing, his phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what the police report says, Mother. Sebastian is dead. I saw the boat burn. Someone is playing a sick game to tank the merger, and I am not going to sit in the city and wait for them to—" He stopped mid-sentence, color draining from his face. He slowly lowered the phone. "Mother?" he whispered. "Mother, are you there?" He dropped the phone. It clattered. I looked up, letting a mask of innocent confusion slip over my features. "Julian, what did she say?" He didn't answer. He was staring at the sound bar. The Bluetooth light pulsed crimson. Then, a faint crackle began, like dry wood burning. Beneath it, a woman wept, Julian's mother, an audio recording spliced, distorted, layered, beneath the roar of an inferno. "Julian, help me. It burns." Julian stumbled backward, tripping over the glass coffee table and crashing to his knees. He clamped his hands over his ears, chest heaving. "Stop it! Stop it!" I didn't move from the sofa. I tilted my head, looking at him with profound, suffocating pity. I reached out and gently touched his trembling shoulder. "Julian, darling," I cooed, my voice dripping with the exact patronizing sympathy he had weaponized against me. "Stop what? The room is perfectly quiet." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot and entirely unhinged. "The speakers, Scarlett. Are you deaf? The fire. My mother." "There's nothing on the speakers, sweetie," I whispered, stroking his hair, feeling the cold sweat. "Are you sure you aren't imagining things?" "The doctor warned us that extreme stress could cause auditory hallucinations. You haven't slept. Your mind is playing tricks on you, just like mine used to." The horror on his face was a masterpiece. For a narcissist, losing one's mind is terrifying. I was feeding him his own poison, and his ego was choking. Before he could scream again, the heavy iron gates buzzed loudly. The intercom chimed, cutting through the synthesized sounds of the fire. Julian scrambled to the security monitor. Eleanor's black Mercedes idled furiously in the rain. "What the hell is she doing here?" Julian snarled, his panic instantly morphing into blind rage. He punched the release button. 5 minutes later, the front door burst open. Eleanor stood in the foyer, drenched. Clinging to her arm, wrapped in a heavy hospital blanket, was Chloe. My stepsister looked completely hollowed out. The heavy sedatives had stripped away her arrogant sheen, leaving her pale, trembling, and utterly vacant. The press bribed a nurse at the hospital. Eleanor gasped, locking the door behind her. They were swarming the lobby. I had to get her out, Julian. I had nowhere else to go to avoid the paparazzi. Julian stared at Chloe with absolute, unfiltered disgust. "You brought a certified lunatic to my house, while our stock is in freefall because of her? Don't speak about her like that," Eleanor shrieked. "She's your family now, too. She needs a quiet place to recover." "Recover?" I whispered from the shadows of the living room, stepping forward. I made sure my voice was loud enough for Julian to hear, but fragile enough to sound terrified. "Julian, she was the one. At the boutique. Chloe told me she hated me. She told me she was going to take everything from me." Julian's head snapped toward me, his paranoia instantly locking onto a new, tangible target. "What are you talking about, Scarlett?" Eleanor demanded, her eyes narrowing. I looked at Julian, letting a single tear fall. The Zippo lighter, Julian, the one on my pillow. Who else had access to my bedroom? Who else wanted to punish you for choosing me? "She must have stolen it from your mother's vault." It was a brilliant lie. Julian, desperate for a tangible scapegoat, swallowed it whole. He wanted to believe this was a psychotic, jealous revenge plot by his mistress, not a living ghost. "You sick bitch!" Julian hissed, taking a menacing step toward Chloe. Chloe barely registered his presence. She stared blankly at the wall, her fingers twitching under the blanket. "The bugs," she mumbled incoherently. "They're in the walls." "Keep her away from me," Julian ordered Eleanor, his voice dangerously low. "Put her in the guest wing. Lock the door. If she comes near Scarlett or me, I swear to God I will have her committed to a state facility where they use electroshock." Eleanor, realizing she had pushed the Vance heir too far, quickly dragged the catatonic Chloe down the long, shadowed hallway toward the guest suites. Night fell, the storm slamming into the coast, battering the shutters. The ocean roared. At exactly 11 p.m., the trap snapped shut. I was sitting in the master bedroom when the lights flickered, surged brightly, and then died completely. The hum of the central air conditioner ground to a halt. The entire estate was plunged into an absolute, suffocating darkness. Bash had cut the main breaker. From the floor below, I heard Julian curse violently. I slipped my phone out of my pocket, hitting the record button. The screen provided a faint glow as I crept out of the bedroom and silently made my way down the sweeping glass staircase. Julian was in his study, frantically rummaging through his desk with the flashlight on his phone. He was looking for the biometric safe. "Julian?" I called out softly, standing in the doorway. He spun around, the flashlight beam blinding me. In his other hand, he held a sleek, black Glock 19. His finger hovered dangerously close to the trigger. "The backup generator didn't kick in," he breathed heavily, his eyes wild, the gun trembling slightly. Someone severed the lines. It wasn't the storm. Suddenly, the intercom cracked to life, Bash having rerouted it. The voice echoed through the pitch-black hallways. "Julian." It was Chloe's voice, an audio clip Bash had flawlessly synthesized to sound terrifyingly insane. "I'm going to cut her throat, Julian. And then I'm going to burn us all down. Just like your brother." Julian roared, the narrative I'd planted now unshakable. He believed Chloe, in her psychosis, was coming to murder us. "Lock the bedroom door," Julian ordered me, pushing past me into the dark hallway, raising the gun. "I'm going to put an end to this crazy bitch once and for all." I didn't go back to the bedroom. I followed him, maintaining a distance of 20 feet, my phone recording every frantic, paranoid step he took in the dark. The estate was a labyrinth of shadows and lightning flashes bleeding through the storm shutters. Julian moved toward the guest wing, his breathing ragged, the flashlight beam darting erratically. Crash. Shattering glass came from the foyer. Julian whipped around, his flashlight sweeping the space. A lightning flash illuminated Chloe, draped in a blanket, holding a silver candelabra. She had wandered out, disoriented. "Julian?" Chloe's real fragile voice called out into the blackness. "Mom? I can't see. The bugs are biting me in the dark." But Julian, driven mad by gaslighting and audio, saw a monster holding a weapon, coming to set him on fire. "Drop it," Julian screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. He aimed the Glock squarely at the center of the darkness where she stood. "I said drop it, you psychotic bitch!" Chloe, confused and frightened, took a step toward the blinding beam of his flashlight, raising her hand to shield her eyes. The candelabra glinted menacingly. "Julian, please." The gunshot was deafening. The muzzle flash illuminated Julian's face, a mask of absolute, murderous terror. Chloe's body jerked violently backward. The candelabra hit the floor with a heavy clang. She collapsed onto the hardwood without another sound, the pristine white hospital blanket rapidly blooming with a spreading dark crimson stain. Julian stood frozen, the gun still raised, the acrid smell of gunpowder masking the ocean storm. His chest heaved. He had done it. He had eliminated the threat. "Oh, Julian," I whispered, my voice echoing clearly through the sudden, horrifying silence of the house. He spun around, shining the flashlight on me. I was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at him. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't hiding. I was holding my phone up, the red recording light blinking steadily. "Scarlett?" he breathed, his voice hollow, slowly lowering the gun. "I had to. She was going to kill us. You heard her." "I heard nothing, darling," I replied, my voice as cold and smooth as the marble beneath my feet. "I just saw you execute an unarmed, heavily medicated patient in cold blood." "What are you doing?" he demanded, panic returning as he saw the phone. "Stop recording! Are you out of your mind?" "I'm perfectly sane," I smiled, the expression finally reaching my eyes, devoid of any warmth. "But you, Julian, you shoot at ghosts in the dark." From the shadows, a tall figure stepped silently into the foyer. A Zippo clicked open, illuminating Sebastian Thorne's sharp jawline and dark, unforgiving eyes. Bash took a slow drag from a cigarette. "Hello, little brother." Bash's low, gravelly voice rolled through the darkness like thunder. "Nice shot." Julian Vance dropped his flashlight, falling to his knees beside the bleeding body of his mistress, as the reality of his complete and utter destruction finally set in. Police cruisers pulsed like a neon requiem. Authorities breached the doors, finding a masterpiece of manufactured tragedy. Me, huddled, weeping hysterically. Chloe, bleeding out onto the hardwood. A shattered spine ensuring a lifetime staring at a hospital ceiling. But the true spectacle was Julian, completely fractured. When officers tried to disarm him, he thrashed, foamed, and screamed wildly about dead brothers and ghosts, begging them to arrest Sebastian Thorne's charred corpse. Bash, of course, was already gone. He had melted back into the storm long before the sirens wailed, leaving Julian alone in the dark with the smoking gun and a mind completely severed from reality. The fallout was a symphony of ruin. Within 48 hours, the merger collapsed. The board, terrified by their CEO's paranoid frenzy, triggered a mass sell-off. Bash, through Legion Holdings, acquired Vance Enterprise for pennies on the dollar, devouring Julian's legacy, erasing the Vance name entirely. Eleanor didn't fare better. FBI agents raided the penthouse, quickly finding the hidden cameras. Footage of her crushing antipsychotics and LSD into my tea was broadcast, leading to a 20-year sentence for attempted murder and trust fund fraud. Julian's attorneys pleaded temporary insanity, validated by his ravings about Bash. But the judge, based on my deeply concerning psychological evaluation, remanded him indefinitely to Blackwood Psychiatric Institute in Switzerland, the exact high-security facility he'd booked for me. Winter descended on the Alps when I visited Julian. Blackwood's steel doors hissed open, releasing the sterile smell of despair. I walked down the corridor in a blood-red silk dress and sable coat, heels clicking like an executioner's axe. Bash walked silently beside me, a towering specter. We had married in Monaco 3 weeks ago, over the ashes of the past. The orderly stopped outside cell 412, a thick pane of bulletproof glass, and a steel slot for food trays. "He's heavily sedated, Mrs. Thorne," the orderly murmured, glancing nervously at Bash. "Mostly bad days. The paranoia is deeply ingrained. I only need a moment." I smiled softly. The orderly unlocked the heavy door and stepped aside, allowing me to enter the sterile, white room. Bash remained in the corridor, leaning casually against the wall, perfectly visible through the observation glass. The padded suite was blindingly white. Julian sat in the center, wearing a gray jumpsuit. The arrogant golden boy was gone. His face was gaunt, hair lank, eyes heavily hooded by medication, struggling to focus on the crimson vision before him. "Scarlett?" he croaked, his voice a dry, ruined rasp. He scrambled backward until his spine hit the padded wall, his hands instinctively coming up to protect his face. Are you real?" "I'm real, Julian," I said, my voice smooth. I stood in the center, letting him soak in my composure, looking down at him like a god inspecting an insect. He blinked, a desperate, pathetic spark of hope igniting in his hollow eyes. He dragged himself forward across the soft floor, his hands reaching out to grab the hem of my red silk dress. I didn't pull away. I let him hold it, letting him feel the expensive fabric he could no longer afford. "You came," he sobbed, burying his face in the silk, his tears hot and pathetic against my bare ankle. I knew you would. I knew you still loved me. Scarlett, you have to tell them. Tell them it was Chloe. She poisoned my mind. She put the bugs in the walls. She made me hear the fire. I know, Julian, I whispered, reaching down to gently stroke his unwashed hair. He practically purred at the contact, starved for the affection he used to swat away. Chloe was a monster. She wanted to lock me in this very room. Yes! Yes! Julian looked up, his eyes wide and frantic with manic gratitude. She tricked me, Scarlett. I was confused, but I only ever wanted to protect you. You know that, right? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, get me out of here. My mother. Where is my mother? She can fix this. Eleanor is in a 6x8 cell in Rikers Island. I stated calmly, my fingers pausing in his hair. She's trading her Cartier bracelets for commissary noodles. She can't help you, Julian. Hope drained, replaced by crushing panic. He looked past my legs, eyes locking onto the bulletproof glass, seeing the towering silhouette of Bash in the corridor, his sharp jawline, merciless eyes, and mocking smirk. Julian let out a guttural, breathless wheeze, releasing my dress and scrambling backward like a terrified crab. No. He hyperventilated, his chest heaving violently against the gray jumpsuit. No, he's dead. The doctors said he was a hallucination. They promised me he wasn't real. He's very real, Julian, I said, my voice dropping an octave, shedding the last, lingering trace of the fragile girl he thought he had conquered. The cold, venomous truth finally bled into the sterile white room. He took your company, he took your legacy, and he took your bride. Julian stared, his jaw trembling, struggling to process the betrayal. The gaslighter was suffocating on his own manipulations. Why? Julian gasped, clutching his chest, his narcissistic ego fracturing into a million irreparable pieces. Why would you do this to me? I took care of you. I gave you a home when you were broken. You loved me. A dark, chilling laugh slipped from my lips. I knelt down, bringing my face inches from his. I could smell the stale sweat and the sour tang of his antipsychotics. I never loved you, Julian, I whispered, my eyes locking onto his with absolute, terrifying clarity. I didn't endure your condescension, your cheating, and your drugs because I was a broken, pathetic little bird. I endured it because I was waiting for him. I reached out, my perfectly manicured fingernail tracing the line of his jaw, the exact same jawline he shared with his half-brother. You always told me I was just a stand-in for Chloe, I smiled, a predator baring its teeth in the final lethal strike. You were wrong. From the very beginning, Julian. You were just the stand-in for Bash. I only kept you around because you had his eyes. Julian stopped breathing. The destruction of his reality hit him. He wasn't the mastermind, just a mannequin I'd used while the real king plotted. He opened his mouth to scream, but only a wet gurgle escaped. He curled in on himself, rocking, his mind giving way to the dark. I stood, smoothing my dress. Bash pushed the steel door open for me, his hand resting on my back as I stepped out. The deadbolt clicked shut, sealing the tomb. Did you leave anything behind? Bash murmured, his dark eyes tracing the triumphant, wicked spark in my gaze. From the other side of the bulletproof glass, a raw, inhuman scream finally ripped from Julian's throat, echoing through the sterile halls of the asylum like the howl of a damned soul. I leaned up, pressing a slow, intoxicating kiss to Bash's jaw. Not a single thing, I replied. Now, take me home.